When it comes to sprawling epic fantasy television, few shows have achieved the cultural impact of Game of Thrones. For nearly a decade, it served as a weekly spectacle of drama, betrayal, and intrigue, pulling viewers deep into the tumultuous world of Westeros and beyond. But why exactly did Game of Thrones become such a phenomenon? At its core, Game of Thrones wasn't just a story about kings and queens fighting for a fancy chair. It was a ruthless and unapologetically human story about power, its pursuit, its cost, and its consequences. Adapted from George R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, the show brought together complex characters and morally ambiguous decisions that felt grounded despite the fantasy setting. Heroes were flawed, villains were layered, and no one was truly safe. For many, the biggest draw was its unpredictability. Early on, the show established one brutal rule: nobody was off limits. Whether it was Ned Stark's shocking death in Season 1 or the infamous Red Wedding, Game of Thrones continually shattered expectations. Audiences weren't just watching a story unfold, they were bracing themselves for twists that could rewrite the trajectory of the entire narrative. This kept people hooked, discussing theories and agonizing over character fates week after week. But it wasn't just the story that made Game of Thrones stand out. The craftsmanship behind the show elevated it to another level. HBO poured immense resources into production, delivering breathtaking cinematography, costume design, and attention to detail. From the icy vastness of the Wall to the warmth of King's Landing, the visual world of Westeros felt incredibly immersive. Combine that with Ramin Djawadi's pulsating, unforgettable score, particularly the iconic opening theme, and you had a television experience that felt larger than life. The casting played a huge role as well. Many of the show's stars were relative newcomers when the series began, yet they quickly became synonymous with their roles. Lena Headey's Cersei Lannister, Peter Dinklage's Tyrion, Emilia Clarke's Daenerys, and Kit Harington's Jon Snow were all brilliant portrayals of deeply layered characters. Their performances breathed life into Martin's intricate creations, and as the line between actor and character blurred, fans began treating them like living mythic figures. Another reason for the show's success was the way it tackled universal themes. Yes, there were dragons and White Walkers, but beneath it all, Game of Thrones was a sharp examination of humanity. It explored the nature of loyalty, greed, ambition, love, and betrayal. At a time when audiences were craving complex stories, the show delivered drama that wasn't black and white. Political maneuvering and moral ambiguity set the stage for memorable moments that felt as much like Shakespeare as they did fantasy. But as the series rose higher and higher, breaking viewership records and dominating cultural conversations, it was also setting itself up for one of television's biggest controversies. The final season, released in 2019, left fans more divided than any previous chapter. It wasn't just disappointment. To understand why, we have to consider the pacing. The earlier seasons had the luxury of adapting George R. Martin's novels, which were painstakingly plotted, but by season 6, the show had outpaced the books, leaving writers David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. This led to growing concerns about rushed storytelling. Conversations that might have stretched over multiple episodes were often crammed into quick exchanges. Character arcs and while individual moments in the final season were visually stunning, like the Battle of Winterfell's haunting fight against the Dark, it became clear that spectacle was taking priority over substance. Perhaps the biggest controversy revolved around Daenerys Targaryen's transformation into the Mad Queen. While Martin had hinted at darker tendencies in her character, fans felt the show didn't take enough time to convincingly develop her descent into tyranny. It felt less like tragedy and more like shock value. By the finale, some viewers found closure in the ending, while others felt betrayed by it. The resolution was polarizing, but it didn't change the fact that a cultural juggernaut had come to an end. The show's legacy, however, continues to endure. Game of Thrones will always be remembered for the way it reshaped TV storytelling, pushing boundaries that made ambitious shows like The Witcher, House of the Dragon, and others possible. In a way, the legacy of Game of Thrones mirrors the story it told. It's one of great triumphs and costly mistakes, moments of brilliance alongside frustrations. But love it or hate it, one thing remains clear. Game of Thrones changed television forever, and its fire breathing impact won't be forgotten anytime soon.